The reading this morning is Mark 12, 38 to 44. As he taught, he said, "Beware of the scribes who like to walk around in long robes, to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces, and to have the best seats in the synagogues and the place of honor at banquets. They devour widows' houses, and for the sake of appearances say long prayers. They will receive great condemnation." He sat down opposite the treasury and watched the crowd putting money into the treasury. Many rich people put in large sums. A poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins, which are worth a penny. Then he called his disciples and said to them, "Truly, I tell you, this poor widow has put in more than all of those who are contributing to the treasury. For all of them have contributed out of their abundance, but she, out of her poverty, has put in everything she had, all she had to live on."
How much is too much? How much is too much to ask of somebody? That's one of the questions which comes to me out of that story that Susan just read. The other one is the sermon title, because I do choose these things with some logic. But how much is it too much to ask? That's a stewardship question. Often when we think of stewardship questions, we think of, well, how do we ask for more? But how much is too much to ask is also a stewardship question. It's a stewardship question whether we think of the poppies on our breast. How much was too much to ask? It's a stewardship question when we think of COP26, which is happening as we speak in Glasgow. Because environmental stewardship is as much a part of the stewardship question as anything else. How much is too much to ask? It sort of is a parallel to how much is too little to ask. Or the Goldilocks question is, what's the right amount to ask? Not too much, not too little. In his book, Trinity, Leon Uris, the main character, Connor Larkin, is an Irish farmer who becomes a blacksmith, to his father's great dismay, because Thomas wanted to pass the farm on to Connor. And it said that, Connor is a very good blacksmith. He's well known. He's called on for very intricate work. And in Ireland, in the late 19th, early 20th century, a lot of that intricate work would be work for the church. And Connor is at least bordering on atheist. I have a suspicion that Leon Uris isn't a big fan of the church, given the scope of his novels. I know he's not a big fan of the English, given the scope of his novels. And it says that Connor is always leery of taking work for the church, because he imagined the priests taking the egg money of the parishioners to pay for the work. How much is too much to ask? That, I think, is one of the questions Jesus is raising in this story. Over the years, we've had a lot of discussion in scholarship circles about, is Jesus praising this woman because she gives all that she's got? These 2 small coins, all that she's got, the widow's mite. Or is he condemning a structure? There was one time when people thought that she was paying a temple tax and was required to pay her last red cent to the temple. That's not likely true. It's one of those times when the Christians have found some way to condemn Jewish society for something which wasn't necessarily true. Because in Jewish society, there may have been a temple tax, but if you had nothing else, eating was more important than the temple tax. If Jesus is condemning the strict systems in the story, it's saying, how have we let this widow, and in the ancient world, widows and orphans were the poster children. They were the ultimate sign of vulnerability. How have we let this widow have nothing but these 2 small copper coins? What's too much to ask? And I think it's important that we stop and ask ourselves, well, why is this widow doing this? Why is she giving these 2 small copper coins? Because that gets down to our understanding of too much to ask. Is she doing it out of a sense of obligation? Possibly. Out of guilt? Possibly. Or she may be doing it because the temple has helped her in the past. Is she doing it because she's experienced God's presence in such a way that she feels she has to give back? She has to share even the little bit she has. Gratitude is a wonderful driver for giving. When I was in Atikokan, I was always struck by how easily, for lack of a better word, easily they met their M&S goal every year because we weren't rolling in money. We were often struggling to meet the budget, but the M&S goal was met every year. And so I was talking with people about it, and they said, yes, but probably about 10 years earlier, Atikokan had needed to apply for and had received a mission support grant. And they knew that mission support grants were funded by the Mission and Service Fund. Ever since that day, ever since that year, M&S support in Atikokan was very strong. Gratitude is a wonderful driver for giving. So maybe that's why this widow, who has almost nothing, comes up to a box like this one, which apparently has something in it, and puts those last 2 coins into the box. How much is too much to ask? I think if we were to discuss it logically, we would say that asking a widow who has 2 coins left to put them in the temple box, I think there are many of us who would say, that's not fair. We shouldn't ask that. There are others who would say, well, she's got an obligation to give. If you want to be part of the community, you have to support the community. And so while I think wondering if we're asking too much and how we define too much is important. It's important when we talk about, well, when do we get off the fossil fuel roller coaster, treadmill? What's too much to ask? It's important to ask when we talk about never again. What's too much to ask? It's important to ask when we talk about how do we encourage people to support our communities. What's too much to ask? But at the same time, we have to remember we don't always know why it might be too much or why it might not be enough or why it's just that Goldilocks number. And I think in the church we often look for the Goldilocks number. The one which doesn't feel like we're short-selling ourselves, but also the one which doesn't feel like we're pushing too hard. So we look for that nice in-between zone. I think in the end, because we are not a taxation-based faith, because we don't, and there have been faiths and places, even within our roots, where people would say, Joe Smith, he's got a really good job. When you go to visit Joe for the building fund, you need to come back with a pledge for this amount. In the 50s and 60s, there was a company which ran a lot of building campaigns for the United Church, and that was how it's been described to me that they worked, by people who said, I am never, ever, ever, ever doing that again. We as a church have chosen that we let people decide what's too much, which is good. We as a church have decided we let people decide what they have to give, whether it's something that gets dropped into this box or the other box on the way into church, or whether it's something for the auction, or whether it's helping out at the garage sale. We let each other decide what's too much. What I want us to do is to open ourselves for that question right there, to share our stories about why. Why do we put stuff in this box or have it come out of our bank account every month? Why do we spend hours standing on that hard concrete slab at the armory? Why do we do what we do for the community? Some of it we might do out of obligation. Some of it we might do because we were brought up to say this is what it means to be a member of a group. A capital M member, as somebody sitting behind me has used at one point. Some of it we do because we feel gracious. We feel gratitude for the things the group, this place, has done for us. Sharing our stories about why we give, why we support. That's a key part of helping others see why they might want to be part of this community, why they might want to support this community as well. The community only exists if we support. The community only will continue to exist if we provide the support needed for us to be together. And yes, some of that's this. The treasure is sitting right over there. I have to mention, some of that's this. But some of it's also the phone calls, delivering newsletters, checking in on each other. Why do we do it? I believe we do it because we think it's important. I think we do it because we know that this community adds something to our lives. And I really want to believe, although the text doesn't tell us at all, that that's why that widow, with 2 small coins, all she had left, put them in the box because she believed this was important. This made a difference. This added to her life. May God help us to sort out how best we can support our communities. Amen.